Hey guys, welcome back. Today's topic is about sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Every day I am taking a live session or uploading a video regarding 10th class biology syllabus. If you are a 10th class student and want to learn through my lectures, then subscribe and press the bell icon. Let's start with today's topic. Here, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Flower is morphological and embryological marvel, and it is a site of sexual reproduction in plants. So here the flower is the site of sexual reproduction in plants. Okay, I repeat this once again. Flower is a morphological and also embryological marvel, okay, for the biologist. And this flower is the site of sexual reproduction in plants. Here, this is a longitudinal section of a flower. We find here the different parts like sepals, then petals, then here we find anther, filament, then stigma, style, ovary. About all these parts I will discuss in detail. Here, the reproductive parts of angiosperms are located in the flower. Here angiosperms are the flowering plants. Okay, so angiosperms are the flowering plants. So in these angiosperms, the reproductive parts are located in the flower. Now, the different parts of a flower like sepals, petals, stamens, pistil are present. You can see in this. Okay, so this is sepal. Okay, so this is of a green colored mostly. So this is sepal. Okay, so this is sepal, and here the group of sepals actually forms a whorl called calyx. Calyx is a whorl, and here we find a petal. This brightly colored large petal we find here. So the second whorl is called corolla. Okay, and here we find anther, filament, that forms the third whorl called androecium. Okay, androecium, which consists of stamens, okay, and the fourth whorl is gynoecium. Okay, gynoecium, which consists of carpels. So these are the four different whorls present in a flower. So here, from outside to inside, the floral whorls are the outermost whorl is calyx. Green colored sepals are present here. You can see this is calyx. Okay, these are the sepals. Now the second whorl, corolla. You can see this is a petal. This one is a petal. So brightly colored petals are seen. This is a corolla whorl. Okay, and the androecium, which consists of stamens, and the stamens here anther and filament. Together they form stamen. This is group of stamens. They form androecium, the third whorl. And the innermost whorl is gynoecium. It consists carpels. So or pistil. You can see here. So this is about stigma, style, ovary. So these are the different parts in the carpel or pistil. Okay, so this is about the longitudinal section of a flower, and flower is the site of sexual reproduction in plants. Now moving to the continuation part of this. Here stamens and pistil are the reproductive parts of a flower which contain germ cells. Okay, so these germ cells are meant for the reproduction process. So and here stamens and pistil are the reproductive parts of flower, and they contain these germ cells. Okay, so what about the other two? Here group of sepals, they form calyx, and the group of petals form corolla. Okay, and here stamens group will form androecium. Okay, so and here the fourth whole is gynoecium. Okay, now here the stamens and pistil, these two, stamens and pistil, these are the reproductive parts. Then what about these two other parts? They are non-reproductive. Okay, they are accessory. They are non-essential for reproduction process. They are accessory folds. These folds are called, okay, accessory folds. Accessory folds. 1 calyx, 2 corolla. Okay, so these are the accessory folds. And here the androecium and gynoecium are the reproductive folds. Now here, what is the role of calyx and corolla? You can see here, this is calyx. What can be the role? This is the outermost whole actually. So when the flower is in bud stage, this is protecting the inner walls. Okay, so the role of calyx is, when the flower is in bud stage, it protects the inner walls of the flower. Okay, and about the corolla, the other second whole, okay, it is having the brightly colored petals which attract insects for pollination. So these are the functions of the other two whorls like calyx and corolla. Calyx protects the other whorls, inner whorls, during the bud stage, green color, and corolla, brightly colored, attracts insects for pollination process, which is essential for fertilization to occur in the next steps. Okay, so this is about the different whorls of a flower. Now moving to the details of this, the flower may be unisexual. Okay, uni is single, so maybe either male or female, like this. So unisexual, it contains either stamens or pistil. Stamen is a male part in flower, and pistil is female part in flower. So if a flower consists of either stamens or pistil, then that flower is called unisexual flower. And the best examples, papaya and watermelon. This question is very important board exam. For board exams, okay, for 1 mark question, 2 examples, 1 mark question, and also for other competitive exams, this question can be asked. So unisexual flowers contain either stamens or pistil, and the examples are papaya and watermelon. Now the other one, the bisexual flowers. Bi means 2, so here contains both stamens and pistil. Stamens male parts and the pistil female part. So both are present in such flowers. They are called bisexual flowers. And the examples, hibiscus and mustard. These are the examples of bisexual flower. Now, what are the 2 examples of unisexual flower? What is your answer? The answer should be papaya and watermelon. And what are the 2 examples of bisexual flowers? The answer should be hibiscus and mustard. Very, very important question for board exams for 1 mark. Generally, they ask you 2 examples for 1 mark. And for also competitive exams, this question is important. Now, moving to the next part here, the stamen is the male reproductive part, and it produces pollen grains that are yellowish in color. So this is again one more very important aspect. Okay, so stamen is a male reproductive part of the flower. You can see in this picture, where do we find stamen? Here you can see, okay, this part, okay, this whole structure, okay, this whole structure which I have marked here, which is containing the anther part and the filament part. These two, okay, this part, this highlighted part, this is what we call one stamen. This is another stamen. This is another stamen. So here many stamens we find. Okay, so each one of these structures, these are stamens. Okay, each stamen consists of 2 parts, anther and filament. You can see here in this structure. Okay, here stamen is a male reproductive part, and it produces the pollen grains. It produces pollen grains that are yellowish in color. This yellowish powder often sticks, okay, it often sticks to our hands if we touch the stamen of a flower. So this is one general aspect. Once I will repeat this. Okay. So stamen is the male reproductive part and it produces pollen grains that are yellowish in color, and this yellow colored pollen grains often stick to our hands if we touch the stamen of a flower. Okay. Now here the two parts of a typical stamen are, the first one, the long and slender stalk called the filament, okay, and the terminal generally bilobed structure called the anther. So anther and filament. So these you can see here, okay, in this picture, this part is anther, okay, and this part is filament, okay. So anther and filament. So both these structures, here this is anther and this one is filament. Here this is anther and this one is filament. Okay, so anther and filament together they form stamen. So a typical stamen has two parts. One is filament and the other part is anther. In this, filament is long and slender like this. Let's suppose this is a filament, and a terminal generally bilobed like this. This is what we call anther. Okay, so anther and filament. So this structure, what do we call? It is a stamen. It is a male reproductive part and it produces pollen grains. One very important aspect regarding the pollen grains is they represent male gametophyte. Okay, so pollen grains represent male gametophyte. Okay, and one more very important aspect here is pollen grain generally they are spherical. Okay, now generally they are spherical. Pollen grains are generally spherical and their size is 20 to 50 micrometers, okay, diameter. 20 to 50 micrometer diameter is the size of pollen grain, and pollen grains represent male gametophyte. Okay, so pollen grains are where they are produced? They are produced in stamens. So stamen is the male reproductive part. It produces pollen grains, and pollen grains represent the male gametophyte. Male gametes are formed here, and the size of pollen grain is 20 to 50 micrometer. And when we touch, okay, when we touch these stamens, the yellow colored pollen grains stick to our hands. So this is about the male reproductive part in a flower. And now moving to the next, pistil. This is the female reproductive part. Pistil represent the center of a flower and is the female reproductive part. In this flower you can see this central part. Okay, if I erase this and if I highlight only the central part, like you can see here, okay, this part, okay, this part here is swollen part, and this is the style, and this part is the ovary. Okay, so this part, okay, so this is what we call the central part. It is pistil. It has three parts. Okay, you can see it has a stigma, it has the style, and it has ovary. Okay, so these are the different parts. Okay, so here the pistil consists of the three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Okay, so this is the female reproductive part in a flower, and this is the central part. And here already I discussed about the other parts, like this is anther and this one is filament. Okay, so anther and filament, this is representing the stamen, this is the male part, and this is the female part. All these are the stamens, all these they are male parts, and this central part is the pistil. Okay, now moving to the continuation part of this, here the pistil is the center, it present in the center of a flower, and it is the female reproductive part. It is made up of three parts, and these three parts are: the swollen bottom part is the ovary. Just for simple understanding, I will draw this here. Let's suppose this is a stigma, this is style, and this is ovary. Okay, stigma, style, and ovary. Now here the swollen bottom part, this part is ovary, and the middle elongated part, this one is style, and here the terminal part may be sticky, and this is a stigma. Okay, so here we find stigma, style, ovary, all these together they form pistil, and it is the female reproductive part in a flower. Up to here, all of you, did you understand? Yes. Now let's proceed with the continuation. Here the three parts in the flower, the pistil, are stigma, style, and ovary. Now the ovary inside, it contains ovules. Ovary contains ovules. Okay, and here ovule has egg cell, which is a female gamete. I repeat this once again. Inside ovary, ovules are present. Inside the ovule, egg cell is present, and this egg cell is a female gamete. Okay, so these are the three parts in pistil, which is the female reproductive part in a flower. So you can see here in this picture, this is stigma, and this one elongated style, and the swollen bottom, this is ovary. Inside ovary, ovules are present, inside which egg cell is present. Now the continuation part of this. After this, now moving to the next here, the process of transfer and deposition of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a flower is called pollination. This is one of the very essential event. This is one of the essential event in sexual reproduction process. Okay, I repeat this once again. The transfer and deposition of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a flower is called pollination, and it is an essential event in the sexual reproduction of seed bearing plants. Now here this pollination can be of different types, like it could be a self pollination, it could be a self pollination, like the same flower, if the pollination occurs within the same flower or another flower born on the same plant, then it is a self pollination. Okay, so if I draw here for better understanding, let's suppose this is a plant. Okay, and now in this plant, okay, let's suppose this is a flower. Okay, if this is anther and this is a stigma, so from anther to stigma, if pollen grain is transferred, then this is self pollination. Now let's suppose here is another flower. Let's suppose here is another flower, and here is the stigma. Okay, here is anther. Now from this anther, if it is pollen grain is transferred to this stigma, then also it is called self pollination. So here the meaning is, if the pollination occurs within the same flower or another flower on the same plant, then it is called self pollination. Okay, now opposite to this, one more is cross pollination. Let's suppose here is another plant. Let's suppose here is another plant and it has a flower like this. Okay, so let's assume this is okay. So now if pollen grain, let's suppose this is anther and this part is stigma. If from this anther, if pollen grain is dropped here, okay, if from this anther the pollen grain is dropped here, so these two ways, 1 and 2, this is representing the cross pollination from the anther to stigma of a flower on the different plant, from anther to stigma from a flower on one plant to a flower on the another plant. This is what we call cross pollination. So another flower born on a different plant of the same species. So this is cross pollination. So these are the differences between self pollination and cross pollination. So self pollination occurs in the same flower or another flower born on the same plant, but the cross pollination occurs, okay, here between two different flowers which are present on two different plants of the same species. Here flower of one plant to flower of another plant of the same species. So this is what we call cross pollination. As a whole, the summary, what is pollination? Transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma. So here also this is anther, the pollen grain are transferred from anther to stigma. Here also from anther to stigma. Okay, you can see this is anther to stigma. Okay, this is anther to stigma. Okay, and this is anther to stigma. So like this, anther to stigma, if the pollen grains are transferred, that is what we call pollination, and it is essential event in the sexual reproduction of seed bearing plants. Now moving to the next, here pollination requires an aid of external agency. I repeat this once again, pollination requires the aid of an external agency, and here several biotic and abiotic. Here this is biotic and abiotic. Biotic is living, abiotic non-living. So several biotic and abiotic factors, they play very important role during the process of pollination. Okay, so pollination can occur by water or by wind. Okay, this is abiotic. Now pollination can occur by insects, birds, bats, snails, animals. So like this, pollination can occur by different biotic and abiotic agencies. Okay, so this pollination brings about genetic recombination and produces variations in the offspring. This is very, very important aspect. Okay, I repeat this once again, pollination brings about genetic recombination, okay, and it produces variation. Variations are the differences in the characteristics seen among the individuals of the species. So those differences in the characteristics can be because of this genetic recombination, and maybe because of due to inaccurate DNA copying. And these variations, they are very, very essential for survival of species in changing environmental conditions, and also it is of great importance in evolution of new species. Okay, that is the importance of variations. Okay, and here these variations increases adaptability. Variations increases adaptability in changing environmental conditions. So cross pollination especially, okay, it is very much important in increasing the adaptability. It is very much important in producing the variations which can lead to the evolution of new species in long run. Okay, so this is the importance of pollination process. So here the pollination can occur by both biotic as well as abiotic factors. Okay, now moving to the next, here the female germ cell produced by pollen grain. Here, sorry, this is male germ cell produced by pollen grain. Okay, pollen grain is a male gametophyte. I already discussed this. Okay, male gametophyte is a pollen grain. Okay, so male germ cell is produced by male gametophyte. So the male germ cell produced by male gametophyte, that is pollen grain, fuses with the female gamete. Female gamete is egg cell present in the ovule. Okay, so here you can see this picture. This is ovule. Actually this part is ovary. The swollen base of the pistil is ovary. Inside ovary, ovule is present. This is ovule. This is ovule inside ovary. Inside the ovule we find embryo sac. We find embryo sac. This embryo sac is female gametophyte. Okay, and inside this embryo sac we find the egg cell, female germ cell. This is female germ cell, egg cell. Okay, so inside the female gametophyte, female germ cell is present. Okay, so this is what we need to understand. So this is a stigma, this is style, and this part is ovary. These three together, they are forming the pistil, which is a female part of a flower. Now, once the pollination occurs, the pollen grains are deposited here and they start germination. You can see this pollen grain germinates. You can see this is how pollen tube is formed, and it will reach into this part, okay, female gametophyte. Through the micropyle region, the pore present here in the ovule, the pollen tube enters into the embryo sac. Then there, okay, what happens? The fertilization process occur. So here, what we need to understand is the male germ cell is produced by pollen grain. It fuses with the female gamete present inside the ovule. So this is ovule. Inside the ovule, this is embryo sac, which we call female gametophyte. Inside this embryo sac, here we find female germ cell, which is nothing but the egg cell. Okay, so female germ cell, the egg cell is present inside embryo sac, which is present inside the ovule. So the male germ cell and the female germ cell, they fuse with each other. The fusion of germ cells is called fertilization. Okay, the fusion of male gamete with female gamete. Okay, here the egg cell, okay, is the female gamete. It fuses with the male germ cell. Okay, so the male germ cell fuses with the egg cell. That is what we call fertilization process, and result in the formation of zygote. Okay, so this is how the zygote is formed, and this step is what we call fertilization. It is nothing but the fusion of gametes. Here you can see, this is pollen tube. It is carrying the male germ cell. So in this pollen tube, you can see this is male germ cell. It is carried like this, and it is fusing with the egg cell, which is present here. So like this, the male germ cell fuses with the egg cell, which is nothing but the female gamete. So this fusion of gametes is what we call fertilization, and because of the result of fertilization, zygote is formed. Okay, and now one more very important aspect. After the pollen lands on suitable stigma, it has to reach the female germ cells, which are in the ovary. You can see here, this is ovary, this is a female germ cell. So female germ cells are in the ovary. So after pollination, what should happen? This pollen grain will germinate. The male germ cells have to reach the female gamete. Okay, so here after the pollen lands on a suitable stigma, it has to reach the female germ cells, which are in the ovary, and for this a tube grows out of the pollen grain and travels through the style to reach the ovary. You can see that the tube is growing, it is traveling through the style and reaching the ovary. Okay, so this is what we call chemotropism. Okay, so this is growth because of chemical stimuli. Okay, so this is the best example for chemotropism. Okay, because of the chemical stimuli, the pollen tube is growing through the style towards ovary into the what we call ovule, and inside which we find embryo sac. So inside that it is reaching. So this is chemotropism. Okay, now after this, here after fertilization, the zygote divides several times to form an embryo within the ovule. So zygote undergoes repeated mitotic divisions and it forms embryo within the ovule. Okay, and here the ovule develops a tough coat. The ovule develops a tough coat and is gradually converted into seed. Ovule, this part inside the ovary is an ovule. It develops a tough coat and it forms seed. Okay, now here the ovary grows rapidly and ripens to form a fruit. The ovary grows rapidly and ripens to form fruit. Okay, so this whole structure is growing and it is forming a fruit. Okay, now after this, the seed contains the future plant or embryo which develops into seedling. Okay, I repeat this once again. The seed contains the future plant or the embryo which develops into seedling under appropriate conditions, and this process is known as germination. Okay, so this you can see here, this is a seed. Inside the seed we find the embryo. Okay, this is embryo, so it is a future plant and it has the different parts, like this is radicle, it is future root is formed, this is plumule, the future shoot is formed, and these are the cotyledons which store food material. So this is how the seed is having the future plant called embryo. Okay, and it develops into seedling under appropriate condition, and that development of seedling is nothing but the germination process. Now here comes one very important aspect. Okay, so here the process of fusion of male gamete and female gamete is called fertilization. Okay, here the process of fusion of male gamete and the female gamete is fertilization. You can see this is male germ cell and here we find female germ cell. The process of fusion of these two is called fertilization, and that fertilization process results in the formation of zygote. Zygote undergoes repeated mitotic divisions to form embryo. Okay, and embryo is what we call the future plant. Okay, under appropriate conditions it develops into a seedling. Okay, so this is how it is sexual reproduction occurs in plants, and this is how we find different whorls in the flower. So here a quick recap of the topics that we have discussed. Here in a longitudinal section of a flower we find the different whorls. The outermost whorl is calyx. The units of calyx are called sepals. In a bud stage, this calyx, the outermost whorl protects the inner whorls. That is about calyx. Corolla is the second whorl, consists brightly colored petals. These are attracting the insects for pollination. Androecium, third whorl, consists of the male parts, stamens, and each of the stamen consists of the two parts, okay, anther and filament. Then gynoecium consists carpels or pistil. You can see the central part, this is pistil, it is having the stigma, style and ovary. So these are the different parts in a pistil which constitute the female part in the flower. So these are the different whorls. Among these, androecium and gynoecium are the reproductive parts, calyx and corolla are the accessory parts. Okay, and here coming to this diagram, here this is chemotropism. Pollen tube is growing towards the ovule. Okay, this is chemotropism. Male germ cell fuses with the female germ cells, that is fertilization. Okay, and after fertilization, ovary develops into fruit, ovule develops into seed. Okay, so these are the changes that occur after fertilization. This is all about today's session. If you are new to my channel, subscribe for more sessions. If you liked it, share it with your friends. I'll be back with more sessions. Have a great day. Thank you all.